Welcome to a brand new episode of One Soccer Today. It's Oliver Platt, Jordan Wilson, and Gareth Wheeler. Yours truly, Adam Jenkins. A show full of Canadian soccer content, as always, but the lead story is today's Visa Women's Football Report. Presented by Visa, the Women's Football Report for today, and a much different tone and feeling to today's report than what we were discussing on Monday after a lackluster international friendly. Canada and Iceland 0-0 snooze fest. Almost don't blame you if you stopped watching. Much different story yesterday as Canada played Korea Republic and they pounced on the Asian nation early and often. We saw brilliant performances from a lot of young stars and some stars that I think will be frequent contributors to the starting 11, whoever becomes the next head coach of this program. It ends up being a 5-1 victory. They finished 2024. Oliver and I teased this a little bit on Monday. Undefeated, and that is the first time in program history that this nation has gone through a calendar year without losing in 90 minutes or 120 minutes. Their only defeats coming in penalty shootouts. Pretty remarkable. Oliver Platt, from that match, your perch in the control room, what impressed you most?
I think what impressed me most and what struck me most and was the biggest storyline coming out of this game was that, the two most impressive players for Canada, certainly at least in an attacking sense, are the two players that you could say had been snubbed a little bit under the previous manager, Bev Priestman, right? And so
We're
that
snubbed.
was were snubbed. Olivia Smith not being taken to the Olympic Games, despite how she dominated at the youth level and impressed in her opportunities at the senior level. And then Mimi Aladu, who had been playing very well in club football for Benfica. Similar story to Chloe Lacasse in terms of being a player who was maybe a bit of a late bloomer and took a little bit of time for the national team to catch on to her. So their performances were impressive. The impacts that they can have on this team going forwards, obviously, you start to think about now. I do think you have to be a little bit cautious with it. It's not the two strongest opponents Canada are going to face in the near future. You do have, I think, a group of veterans and kind of the more established players in this team who frankly looked exhausted and looked like they need an off season. So there are some different factors, I think, contributing to that, but it does lead to an interesting conversation, not just with those two players, but I think with the profile of the group in general and the ages of the group in general. You now have this very unique situation where you're not playing any competitive games until November 2026 with the CONCACAF W Championship, and you don't have a major tournament until the summer of 2027. So do you start to look at a player like Adriana Leon, who leads the team in goals this year, I think most people would say this team's most important attacking player right now. She's also 32. Do you start to consider younger options and investing minutes in younger options, thinking about, the ages that these players are going to be out when the next World Cup comes around? It's a really interesting one, I think, going into next year with some time to build.
The only point that I'll disagree with from that analysis, Ollie, is I don't know that we will see better opponents for Canada in 2025 than the ones we did see,
I hope
13 and
I hope
19,
so.
based on that schedule. You and me both. Jordan Wilson, what impressed you most?
What impressed me the most one about today is that sweet haircut, Adam Jenkins. I saw you yesterday and you didn't have that, but you have it
Sure
now.
didn't.
And
Sure
you
didn't.
look tip
Put me
top
on
shape,
camera
buddy.
for national team broadcasts, and you'll get this delight more
You
often.
got a you got a face for television, brother. I'll say this though. The takeaways to Ollie's point has to be the new blood, right? And it's not necessarily all younger players. It's players that maybe been overlooked now that get a chance because the Canadian women's national team is a bit in limbo because you don't know who's in charge, who's taking over, when's that happening. So it allows players that have been overlooked, haven't been given the opportunity, weren't Bev Priestman's favorites to just go out and play the game. And I think they needed just that bit of injection of youth, but also just fun in their squad. And I saw that a little bit yesterday. It wasn't present against Iceland, but it's present yesterday once they started to get going and there's a bit of desire and eagerness and players stepping up. And, it's always a good day when you have, I believe, 3 players getting capped. And I know Janet Okeke is a very good player and she'll be a part of this program for years to come. But a window where there are players that weren't playing for this team were so elated to be called up and get to play. And then now that they're tied to Canada, I just think that's the biggest story for me. Obviously, we'll get into the play and the goals and who scored them, but that has to be the silver lining on all the madness that happened in 2024.
A few resounding successes yesterday against Korea Republic. And listen, it must be said that I imagine it was a tough day at the pitch, and Canada knows all about that for Korea Republic with the news of what's going on in their country. But at the end of the day, Canada did what they needed to do, and they won the match convincingly. And it wasn't long ago, Jordan Wilson, that we had a conversation, a debate to question about who Canada's most
Ah, yes.
important player was. And to use a Gareth Wheelerism that I love, roll the tape. And I'm not going to make producer Holly actually roll the tape, but I can tell you that you picked Jade Rose. And listen, no one is undermining the importance of the backline for Canada. But the problem has been with this nation, with this team, goal scoring. So after Olivia Smith's performance, would you like to switch your answer from Canada's most important under 25 player, or are you staying with Jade Rose?
Heck no, I'm not going to switch. And it's not because I'm stubborn. It's because I
Okay.
never argued that Olivia Smith, Wheels is leaving because he doesn't want to really go and defend himself. He knows that I'm
He could
right.
be taking a victory
Right.
lap. He's going to get his
He could be
audio
coming
sorted
back. He could be
and
getting
come
those
back.
notes ready to just
That's
come
right.
and really deal with my case. But no, I never questioned Olivia Smith and her importance for this team and the fact that she can score goals like no other, strike a ball cleaner than most players on the pitch, whoever they play. That was never my argument. My argument was the fact that you have a Vanessa Gilles and you have a Kadisha Buchanan, 28 and 29 years old, and you're going to need someone who is 21 and Jade Rose to emerge in that back line and lead it and make it their own. I also think that I've heard from a little birdie this week, and I totally agree with it, that in Canadian soccer, specifically on the women's side, it's like there's a good player, and we're like, oh, this is the person. This is the person that's gonna go and score 100 goals for Canada. And I do believe Olivia Smith is gonna make a huge dent, and she's going to be a dangerous striker. But can we have goals by committee? Can it be 3, 4 players? Can we not be like, oh, if this player is injured, how is Canada going to score? Like, I don't want to have those conversations. So a part of me isn't really bigging her up because I want other players to step up to the plate and have everyone kind of contribute as a group. But again, if you're playing the US, Japan, Germany, England, Spain, you're going to need a prime Jade Rose to really hold things down in the back.
Gareth Wheeler is back. His audio is sorted, which means it's
Let's go
probably
get
time
his
for a
ammo.
victory lap because you absolutely darted this one with Olivia Smith in her performance, Gareth.
I'm going to lie to you. I didn't hear a word after the Visa Women's Football Report
Basically,
graphic
It's
came
been a
up.
really good report, I promise.
All three of you look great. I did catch the tail end there of Jordan trying to backtrack on his comment that Olivia Smith isn't the top player, under 25 player for Canada. All I know, this is all I know. And who am I to say this? One plays for Harvard in the NCAA right now. One's playing for Liverpool. I'm seeing her names and her moments on promos on Sky Sports on a regular basis. Olivia Smith. This is what I'm seeing right now. I am just saying an attacking player with potential already playing at an exceptionally high level in the game. I will take that player.
But we all know that if Olivia Smith played for
Arsenal, no, go ahead, Ollie. Because
I mean, Jade Rose chose to go to one of the best universities in the world instead of turning pro as a teenager.
Because she's at Harvard and one's at Liverpool. It's like, oh, well, no.
She's gonna play for one of the top. She's gonna be one of the most sought after young players in the world when she finishes at Harvard, which is now. So, that's gonna happen in very short order for her.
Well, let me know when now.
Is that a vote?
She goes and how she does playing against top competition in the pro game. I'm talking about the pro game here.
I'm confident.
Great for our national, but this isn't slighting Jade Rose. This is trying to acknowledge that Olivia Smith is on a level and playing at a level of football right now and showing it now because she's getting the chance to play for Canada. She's exactly what this team needs.
Trust me, I believe that wholeheartedly. And said before people were on the Olivia Smith train, we were yes. We were like, yo, Bev, play her. She hits the ball cleaner than no other. This is what I said when you're away getting your notes, Wheels. I was just like, look, this player is a baller. But going forward, when you need a win, I'm telling you, you start from the back. You know this because we do this every week. It's not about, oh, you score one goal. It's about how you defend from the back and the spine, and you know it in your heart. You might be putting on
you've been watching this team for long enough. You know what they need, Jordan. You know. That's okay. You can just admit I'm right. I'll take that all.
All I know.
It's fine.
All I know, Something Like Olivia is one of my favorite songs of all time, and it got me thinking about that with that
Oh
performance yesterday
wow.
That
from
who's
Olivia Smith.
something
The disrespect to John Mayer. Do yourself a favor and go listen to
Wheels,
that
you
music.
know every
John Mayer
song
as
that
one of your
Oliver
favorite
Platt,
songs?
favorite
John
artist of all
Mayer?
time. Favorite artist of
You
all
and
time.
Andy
Oliver
Cohen
Platt,
love
Wheels,
John
hold on, hold
Mayer.
the
on. No, we can't
Canadian
go on.
women's
We have to
John
national
stay there.
team
Mayer!
needs
The
a
show's just
coach.
gone off the rails,
No,
Adam.
no,
It
hold
will
on. We
not
have to
be
say this.
John Mayer. It will
Wheels,
not be
there's a
John Mayer.
song
We have
that
time
you
for a
don't
debate
know.
about music tomorrow. You two pipe down back there. We have a
Wheels,
show
you know
to
every
do.
song ever.
Oliver Platt, you are confident in Jade Rose. Are you confident in a timeline for the next head coach of this women's national team?
Well done, Jenko.
Um, I don't know. Like, I think for me, probably the thing that complicates it is that if you're looking at potentially taking another international coach who's currently in charge of a different national team, everyone except CONCACAF plays a tournament this summer. So if you want one of those coaches potentially, you're waiting till, late summer, July onwards. I think if they want to go for one of those candidates and they think that's absolutely the right person for the job, they have the ability, given their schedule, to wait for that. I don't think they should be waiting beyond that. And if there's someone out there who they think is the right person who's not attached to a country or a club currently, go and get it done sooner rather than later, because I think this team needs the injection as quick as possible.
Sooner rather than later is Ollie's vote. Gareth, do you agree?
Soon. Like, why wait? Like, there's plenty of managers around the world of football. But I'm more curious about what that process is going to look like. It became clear what the men's process with former players and executives and agents all in their hands with their hands assisting this group at Canada Soccer to make that hire. Is a similar situation going to play out for the women's team? Like, the process is what's interesting to me, and where do they see this team going? Like, what's going to play to their strength? And that's the kind of manager that it's not just getting a name or someone that sounds good. It's who's going to be able to take this team to the next level. So who is that individual? I'm not quite sure as at this point.
Jordan
And for
Wilson,
me,
where do you weigh in here? Sooner or
just quickly,
later?
yeah,
Take
no.
your time.
To Wheels' point, like who's vetting them and who's the process hiring that person or people, and then what happens once they're hired as well? Because that's been the issue, right? When you even look at Bev Priest and what happens, like, okay, well, here's a team, and then we'll see you in 2 years. It's like, what's happening from that point? I know from the men's side as well, you have former players that were ingrained in the program that were a part of the vetting process, or they had a bit of say going on with who was going to be brought in. And everyone's going to talk about Jesse Marsh and the great job that he does, but there was a process because there's expectations. I think to the same degree or similar degree, it's the same thing for the women as well. You have to have someone coming in where people are like, look, you can't just go and take over this team because we know you or you've played here or you have a good CV. Like, what are you going to stand for when times get tough, and put your name forward in that way?
Can I take this conversation a step forward? I don't think that you want to turn to former players on a regular basis for all of your hires moving forward. What Canada Soccer needs is, let's be direct on this, they need a director of football. They need a director of soccer. Like, that's not the general secretary. That's not the elected president. They need someone to run soccer operations within this country that's capable of making these decisions. That's what they need. And that's a huge gap right now that very few people actually talk about, is the footballing structure of Canada Soccer. Once that becomes more robust with a clear identity, then a lot of these things will be a lot more straightforward. That's why I'm asking the question, what does the process look like? Like, who's making this hire and for what reason? That needs to be answered first.
I will give a devil's advocate vote as well to taking
You're welcome,
time
guys.
with
You're
this
welcome.
hire.
That was a great point, Wheeler.
Because
great
as
point.
Ollie rightfully outlines, the schedule and the
Wheels.
lack of nuance or big, not nuance, the lack of meaningful matches coming up. I don't think you need to rush this one as much as no one wants to hear it. In a perfect world, we wave a magic wand and Jan 1, there's a coach. I think this is a process that can take some time if they have someone in mind and if the process deems to vet. I know nobody wants to hear
Then
patience.
don't play
but
games. Then don't play games.
I think
Like, you know,
it might be no. Come on, they need that for international FIFA ranking and a whole bunch of other reasons. Not that they're not going to play games. Come on now.
if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. Let's go. Get this going. Come on.
Well, I'll move this show forward. How about that? Stay tuned for tomorrow's Visa Women's Football Report. We might talk about one of those potential candidates for the Canadian women's national team. And we'll stay with coaching as well. How about that to loop it all together? because we know the search for a couple of coaches in Canadian soccer is underway. Women's national team, Vancouver Whitecaps, and Toronto FC. A little bit less time to sort of properly absorb the departure or the resignation of John Herdman, but now we're in a situation where we know that Keith Pelly and MLSC needs to find a face to lead this program into 2025. Ollie, what are your thoughts on some potential candidates to fill that vacancy for the Reds?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a few names that are going to come up. Jim Curtin is going to come up for every MLS job going because of what he achieved in Philadelphia. Um, I've wanted Toronto FC to do the same thing for a while now, so that's going to be my recommendation on what they do again. I want this club to really start to focus for me for the first time in a few years on the football before anything else, and put the products on the pitch ahead of everything else. And I don't think that this club has done that in recent years, and it has led to predictable results. Um, and now you have Keith Pelly talking about a lot of those things, talking about identity, talking about style of play, talking about, development of players, and all of those different things that I think go into that. But the question is, are they going to deliver on that with the kind of appointment that suggests it's not just talk? Um, so look, I have also said this before, and I will say it again. I think there is someone down the roads in Hamilton who has checked all of those boxes with what he has done with Forge, and that's Bobby Smirniotis. He has won trophies. He has punched above his weight in continental football. He has developed players and sold them to higher levels. He has linked youth football in the region with the first team and progressed players through that pathway. And he's even, with about 1/20th of the budget, nearly dumped TFC out of a cup semi-final this year. So for me, I think he's the candidate who has everything they're looking for in terms of what I would like to see the club do. But with this club, it's sometimes not always that simple. There are things that come, in my opinion, before the football at times, whether it's, what they think will appeal to supporters the most, what they think will get the biggest buzz in the media, so on and so forth. I think if they're really going to live up to, again, those comments that Keith Pelly made, that there's a very obvious choice of someone who knows this region, someone who knows what this club needs, and I think will deliver.
Well, Gareth, every time there's a vacancy, whether it was after John Herdman's departure, before Jesse Marsh, now with Toronto FC, there's always the people who have followed and supported the CPL shouting that there is a coach ready to take the next step, whether that's Bobby Smirniotis, whether that's Tommy Wheeldon Jr., or a litany of candidates in this level of Canadian soccer. Do you think, and maybe you agree with Ollie, that Bobby Smirniotis is a proper candidate here, but on a more macro perspective, do you think the CPL coaches have done enough to prove, whether it's Toronto FC, heck, it could be Charlotte or San Diego, pick your team, to earn some serious consideration and the chance to coach an MLS side?
I don't know. You'll honestly have to go ask those individual clubs. Pamaduka was applying for a lot of different jobs and never was afforded that opportunity to do that at Major League Soccer level. We'll see. I'll take exception to what Ollie said a little bit. I don't think that TFC hired all their managers based on a popularity contest. No one knew who Greg Vanny was. He was brought in to kind of be the bridge between the academy and the first team.
I'm saying Vanny onwards.
Well,
Not
was Chris
including
Armas the popular choice? Maybe Bob Bradley was in that case. I just don't think that it's that linear here. I'll just go with what Keith Pelly said. He said everything's on the table, and that has to do with the squad. That has to do with the running of the club. I think this team can go in a couple different directions. The one assessment, Marco Nepp, who came from Bayern Munich, that oversaw the study of Toronto FC. I mean, the main takeaway that Pelly shared was the club has no identity. So what's the identity that they want to build? That's the first question that needs to answer. Does Bobby Smirniotis tick that box? We don't know, because we don't know what type of club they want to build and what type of club they envision. So I think TFC can go in a couple different directions here. The one is using Pelly's connections with Birmingham City, his connections overseas, and rely on some people that he trusts to bring in a foreign manager that's going to be able to come here and execute that identity. Or he can go the Bobby Smirniotis, the more localized route, maybe someone that is a little bit more cost efficient than doing some wide scale changes. Because this, for me, first and foremost, guys, like Toronto FC, the soccer side of the equation at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment has become a little bit of a problem because they spent far too much money. They're still paying off managers. Like, they're trying to get their books in order. And I think that it could be part of the consideration in whoever they hire. So what kind of staff, what kind of financial commitment would it take? I'm not sure that will be the overriding factor. Perhaps they believe that they just need to bring in a bridge manager until someone else that they may have their eye on becomes available. I think it's a real guessing game here. Like it could be a real wild card play what Toronto FC decide to do. So we all may have preferred candidates or preferred models, but I just don't think there's a slam dunk right now. There's a lot of work that needs to be done at the club outside from just the managing position. So big decision ahead, and I'm really curious to see which direction they may go.
Yeah, just to clarify, like I don't think they've all been popularity contests. If I didn't make myself clear enough there, like I think it's been more. There have been different factors affecting the decision making at different times. Some of them political, some of them different people who I think have been trying to assert themselves at certain times. And I don't think coherent football decisions have been made at the club over the past few years. I think the
Well,
results bear that out.
Well, yeah. Well, when Ali Curtis was there, I mean, I'm sorry, his tenure was disappointing, and since that time, they've really never not had that person. So they need some direction at that club. Adam, just to answer your question, like what? So Vancouver Whitecaps is interesting. I know a lot of conversations are being had in Canadian soccer circles. If a Wheeldon Jr., if a Smirniotis, any one of these Canadian clubs give them a look? I'm not sure Vancouver's in a position to do that right now. Like they need an absolute slam dunk. Although I think that both managers would do a fantastic job at the club, I just think Axel Schuster will go back overseas and go with people that he trusts. This is a big play for a team that I think lots of people think they're on the cusp of winning and trying to do something right now. So I just don't know if the timing is right for either one of those managers. I personally wouldn't rule them out. It's going to be intriguing to see what the brain trust at both clubs think right now.
Very different situations and places that Vancouver Whitecaps and Toronto FC are in. And I imagine over the holidays there will be many discussions. And like we were just discussing with the women's national team, though they have competitive matches, the Caps and the Reds, much, much sooner than Canada does. This is probably something that they would ideally like to take care of sooner rather than later. So that was a look at Major League Soccer today. We will continue our chat with the pro game in Canada with the Canadian Premier League. And we'll start with some reporting by Joshua Healy in Atlantic Canada, who has quickly and maybe quietly become one of the proper insiders of the CPL. He had a splash to announce yesterday, and that was his report that Thomas Meyer-Jaguer is trading coasts from the west to the east and will be suiting up in Wanderers blue next year. Let's go with you first, Jordan Wilson, as our resident defensive expert. What did you think of the move? Or the
Well,
reports?
don't do that, buddy. Please don't ever introduce me like that again. That was rough. But can we just talk about your pronunciation for a second? Like
Thomas.
every time I try to do French names, I do a decent job, and then you go with Thomas. Like what's going on? Like leave some room for us to be close to you. Always go so 10 out of 10.
I've never heard him be called Tomat before. Ever.
It's not
ever.
It's Thomas.
I refuse.
It's a silent test.
Yeah,
Educate yourself. Analysis, Jordan.
I love you, buddy. Thomas Meyer-Jaguer was, for me, the most important player for Pacific FC this season. He was. Like, he chipped in when he needed to on the goal front. He was a leader. But most importantly, the reason why he's being linked to Halifax Wanderers is because a guy like Patrice Geyser needed someone to lead. This is what he brings. He brought it when I played. He brought it to Vancouver Island the whole time. It's just blood. It's sweat. It's tears. It's a guy who wants to win, and it's a guy who can make players around him better. So if Halifax Wanderers, if this is true, and they have a guy like him to build around, Dunn coming back, Mekadesh, this little signing of TMG is really making Gareth Wheeler feel happy deep inside because he said they could be contenders. With a player like that, it's a step in the right direction. I'm not ready to call them contenders, but it is a huge signing. Probably off-season's biggest so far.
Gareth Wheeler, let's split this up. I'm going to ask for a Pacific perspective and a Halifax perspective. Let's take the Halifax perspective from me because maybe Ollie will be blinded by or influenced by his blue tinted glasses.
First off, if Josh Healy is going to go forward having this insider column, his column needs to be called "Just Joshing." Just joshing ? And then he throws out a bunch of rumors. And no, then
doing fine.
You're like, ooh, is that? I like just joshing. It's a good one.
Maybe we'll
Anyways,
get in contact.
TMG, you know me, big pickup by Halifax Wanderers. If Nimick moves on, which it sounds like he likely will, TMG slots right in. They solidified themselves at the back with those three players. They need to be a little bit careful with Julian Dunn coming back from injury. But this is the foundation I speak of. Like, add TMG, add a couple other leaders in this team. I think they need leaders in this team. Need a goalkeeper as well. Then all of a sudden you have really something really something substantial to build off of. As for Pacific, I'm not hitting the panic button on that either. We've been there, done that when they've lost big players at the club. And yes, maybe they've taken a step back in certain ways, but I think their scouting is generally pretty good there. Especially for like Ali Endom, like looked to be the real deal when he stepped in. Unfortunately, he got hurt and was out for the season. Like the young players that they brought in the back this season weren't the issue. So I think that they'll be okay in that area. It just forces them to go in a little bit of a different direction. That's what the Canadian Premier League is all about. So where's that next player? Where's that young player that they continue to build from and establish in this league as true players? So it would just be the next player to go. I wouldn't be too concerned if I was Pacific, but they need to continue to get the recruitment right.
I'm crying if I'm a Pacific fan. Crying.
Yeah, I
Just
mean, I
Joshing?
get it. I get that, but like I think in this league, like Forge are the exception because they've been able to persuade Becker and Johnson and a few of those guys to stay really long term. But most players in this league, I think, are going to play, if they play 3 years somewhere, they're looking for something else, right? Whether it's a move up or even just a move sideways for a change of scenery. And Meir has been there since 2020. Like, he's been there a long time now, so I can kind of understand it from that point of view without necessarily seeing it as a big blow to what Pacific are doing. They do have some good players, I think, at the back already there that if they're retained next season, they'll be able to cope, obviously, with new signings coming in as well. Quintana's a good player. As for Halifax, looks like Nimick is out. This one was just an easy win, a slam dunk for them to bring in a player who is one of the better centre backs in the league. And I think importantly, as the guys have touched upon, good leader, good personality, stays on the pitch, 27, 26, 27 as regular season appearances in the last 3 seasons. He's just reliable, and you know what you're going to get with Thomas Mirjiga. Tomat Mirjiga.
Tomat!
There's no T at the end. Tomat. There's no T. Not Tomat.
When I read his name, there's a lot more letters. Just to say Tomat.
I mean, you want to talk about a lot of letters. You got Halifax loves a hyphenated name with Louis Belangoyet, Jeremy Gagnon-Lapere, and
I liked him.
Now
good player.
Thomas Mirjiga. We will encourage you to keep an eye on Josh Healy's reporting because he's feeding content for the show, and we appreciate the good work that Healy is doing. And hey, Pacific supporters, you have found a way to lose Campbell, Hojabrapur, Didic, Aparicio, perhaps TMG, and yet you never miss the playoffs. I wouldn't be too worried. Have a little bit of patience and a little bit of trust on Vancouver Island. Bustos a little different because he left the league to go to Sweden for that one, but I see where you're going with it. Let's wrap up the show. It's time to get up to today's Tony Bet top picks. Our top picks presented by Tony Bet with 2 fixtures taking place tomorrow in the English Premier League. The lines hot off the press. Let's start with you, Gareth Wheeler. Bournemouth plus 165 at home to Spurs at plus 290. The over is at 3.5.
Yeah, it's getting crushed. It's getting crushed here. No, I love my data. I love my metrics. I look at these 2 teams. Both of them have like the best pressing, highest pressing data and metrics in the Premier League. So I'm expecting goals in this fixture. So despite the over being juiced, I'll still back it in this one. Let's bring on the goals at Bournemouth.
Oliver Platt, what say you?
Yeah, I like the over as well, and I'm going to take Spurs to win away from home in addition.
A little Platt parlay, if you don't mind yourself. Let's keep you there, Ollie. Fulham plus 137. Brighton and Hove Albion plus 265 in that match.
I don't know on this one. Screams draw to me, so I'm just going to abstain and leave this one alone.
Plus 190 if you do fancy the draw. Jordan Wilson, what say you?
There won't be more than 2 goals in this match. A draw sounds good, but it's going to be evenly contested.
Yeah, total
plus money on the under as well. Yeah.
Fulham are analytics darlings of the Premier League right now. I'll back them at home against
Decent
Brighton.
side.
Things have been going just a little bit too well for Brighton. I think that last weekend coming back down to earth a little bit with the 1-1 draw against Southampton. Back to Cottagers. Give me Fulham in this one.
Nice.
Well, we're out of here, and we're not joshing you. We'll be back on One Soccer today
Ah.
tomorrow. Gareth Wheeler, Oliver Platt.
That's
and
a
Jordan
damn good line. A damn good line.